What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to EOS Phoenix. I'm doing another show here because I know that last show, the quality just really wasn't that great in terms of the latency in the video. So I'm going to try just using Google Hangouts directly. Fortunately, that means that I lose my green screen in the back, but I think the quality is probably um, more important than the green screen. So we're just gonna do it like this and try this out. And for those that are interested, there should be the ability for you to join, or if you send me a chat, or if you hit the chat, I can include the link that provides you that. So shouldn't be too much of a problem, but hopefully the quality is improved. So with that said, I did want to just revisit some of the quick topics I talked about with Matt, who was kind enough to join today's call. The first one being the news from Block.one on their decision to, I guess, propose a new constitution. So that's one of the things I want to go over today. I'm going to just read this through, not everything, but just give you guys a summary. So as you guys know, EOS.io is a little bit different than most blockchains in that their focus is on enabling the ability for humans to transact and build systems, right? That's what blockchain partially is about. I mean, we started with obviously Bitcoin, which was the first version of a use case of blockchain, but blockchain's a lot more. And EOS enables this by using what's called a Ricardian contract type blockchain. So this not only has code, but it also carries with it the intent, human readable description of what the code is supposed to do. And also it's a walled garden type blockchain in that it enables anybody to participate with, an agreement to follow those rules. It looks like we had somebody just join. What's going on, Britt? I see.
Not much. What's happening?
Not too much. We're here going over the Constitution, well, the proposed EOS Constitution, I should say, version 2.0. So that's kind of on deck right now. I did want to just share that with everybody because I did find it interesting that I think some people were envisioning that this was the actual Constitution, and it's important to note that it's a proposal. So it's subject to communities' discussion and input and comments. And so that's what really this channel is about. It's about getting people together to talk about differences and issues and commonalities. I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to look at the Constitution and if you had any thoughts, but I'm just going to go over that today with the community.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm more familiar with what was taken out, and that was the provision about accounts kind of being repossessed after 3 years of inactivity. But yeah, I mean, I'd love for you to go through it one by one. I have much to learn here.
Okay. So great. So what I have up right now is I was just going through their background on what they kind of shared and some of the challenges with what EOS is trying to do. It's this delicate balance of, code is law versus, I think, rules and structures in place to allow us to govern ourselves when we interact with one another, right? So we need a way to ensure that there's accountability, and also our code has, I guess, accountability as well. So if things don't go right with our code, so there's, I guess I'm envisioning two different aspects of this. One is, the human aspect to it and people interacting with one another, and sometimes maybe we don't do what we say we're supposed to do, or there's a misunderstanding. The other aspect is just when things happen bad with the code, how do you resolve them as a community? And so I think they're actually trying to tackle both things, in addition to, having outright fraud by some people, as we've seen in Ethereum. Some people will just pretend they're somebody or something, and they'll steal tokens from others. So I think the main takeaway from this is if the intent is to have a blockchain scale and have something that my mom, your mom, our sisters and our family is going to use, the technology has to be pretty secure, has to have some safeguards, it has to have something that everybody can understand, and that's where the Ricardian contract comes in versus the law of the jungle, which is Ethereum. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I think that's what they're trying to say here with that first part of the delicate balance.
Yeah. Is this an update from the original? Because I feel like the original was attempting to kind of tackle these as well.
It was, but the original, I think, struggled with that balance of code is law versus, I think, where arbitration comes in. So in
Yeah.
this proposal that they have, they're attempting to, I think, balance out a little bit better by saying, there is aspects where you need code. Code is law, and maybe there's other aspects where um, it's more of a community governance and where the arbitration lies, because the role of block producers, their role, I don't know if they can police the entire spectrum of dApps that will be developed in code. you know um, I think if you imagine there would be thousands of distributed applications in the future, are they going to actually have the ability to um, help arbitrate each one? I guess that was one of the challenges that I saw with the originals. That I guess just the scope of where responsibilities lie for EOS.io as a platform versus dApps. And it sounds like this version is making it a little bit more distinct between the two.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's unclear where the line of authority and power began and ended. Like, if this was originally intended to only be about governance of dApps, I I feel like there were a lot of people who somehow were misled. Because what I'm seeing with this proposal, there's a bit of a backlash and a lot of concern about some of these hacked accounts and people who were victim to perhaps the transition from Ethereum to the EOS blockchain not being so smooth. We, I mean, I'm one of these people as well who shares that concern in whether we're going to be able to make those people whole or not. And I feel like before this proposal 2.0 constitution, there was kind of some consensus around being able to come together as a community and make sure that those individuals who were victims to phishing, hacking, whatever, or just not being around to register their keys, making sure that those individuals were taken care of. But now it seems like this is definitely a final nail in that coffin.
Well, I think the hacking, the initial hacking folks. I mean, there's potentially different ways that as a community we solve that. One is
Mhm.
um, there was this order by ECAF that went through and froze some of those accounts, and I think most of those were protected. There was, I think, one account or maybe a few that unfortunately that list didn't get routed to all the BPs, and I think that transaction did go through, but that was one out of
Yeah.
many. And arguably, with the funds that are available, there are other ways that those holders could be made whole, provided that there's
Hmm.
sound evidence that would suggest that they're telling the truth and their tokens were actually lost.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's another component to it.
right. And I mean, yeah, in the case where victims are hacked, that's very difficult. But in the cases where we know we have people who hold the private keys to accounts that did not make it over to the main chain. I mean, I watched a YouTube video of someone apparently having 10,000 EOS just kind of frozen in Ethereum's contract. In these kinds of cases, I think we can band together and pretty much agree on that person needing to have some sort of relief. So And that's fine. I think there are a lot of things we can do as a community. My concern is that a lot of the attention and effort is being channeled into this new constitution, and we're just kind of saying these nice flowery phrases like, "Oh, we'll come together as a community and sort this out later." Even Dan himself, who says, I think in Telegram, he said, "I'm sick to my stomach or something by hackers but the phishing attacks. But the one thing that makes me sicker is sort of unlimited, unchecked power." And the thing is I don't think we need to tackle just one. We can do both of these, actually. I don't think we should be talking about this constitution without a community proposal for how to address what we're losing, the ability to arbitrate hacked funds, or, we should be at the same time, I believe, simultaneously talking about the smart contract infrastructure that needs to be placed to deal with these types of arbitration issues, or whatever proposal that anyone has in mind for handling these types of really unfortunate scenarios.
Well, I mean, and
that's
well, I guess, and just to clear up though, I mean, there are millions or hundreds.
I mean, this contract is cutting the head off of our animal right here.
Yeah, well, I guess what I want to say
is to make sure that we're also addressing what we're losing this update.
Right, but I guess one of the things is, the line would have to be drawn somewhere. I mean, if someone is going to argue that they're able to address all the problems with ensuring that everybody from the Genesis, for example, gets their tokens, when some of that at that level, at the Genesis level, the Genesis block level, we're not talking about mainstream adoption at that point. We're talking about people who interacted with the smart contract and invested in EOS as a software. I guess there's a different expectation between people who do that versus potentially in the future when you have large mainstream adoption come in with a hardware wallet and biometric ID. And you also have talk, and that's what I was going to share today. You also have talk from EOS where it seems like there'd be like third-party services that almost operate like banks for those that want it, to opt in to that system. And so for those people, if they want to do that, that would be available for them. It would basically make it almost like, I don't want to say impossible, but there'd be more safeguards maybe for them from their perspective. And for people who are more tech savvy, who want to just manage their own funds and be their own bank, we have a product for them too. So you're able to, I think, address both things. And it's unfortunate that I think with any solution that is going to be proposed, one thing that we can say is that it probably doesn't address all the problems we had with the Genesis block or hacking of all coins. I think the best thing that they can do, which I think they've done, is to offer some solutions to it. They've frozen the accounts for known hack attempts, and those folks, their funds are safe. Now, you can't do that for 100%, of the population.
Well, my understanding is we can't do that ever again, actually.
Well, no. Well,
I mean,
let's back up though. Like what I just said, though, there would be different products for different people. So, I mean, if you have a product that you opt in to, that is like a bank, basically, so you have a multi-sig account, the likelihood of you losing your funds in that account is probably very low. It does come at a cost because now you're dealing with a market, a free market system that offers these services, but it's still, you're not the entire, it's not just you who has control over that, right? You're kind of giving up some of your ownership and your power to help manage that risk. And that's an option for you. The other thing that Dan has done is he's added time delays. So, I mean, with notifications. So I think while it's possible you could still have that happen to you, it's kind of up to the individual's individual decision, right? Free deciding principles, free to determine that what it is you want to do with your wealth. And it might be that you do both. What do you think?
So no, I mean, I agree with all of this, and I think there's a lot of infrastructure being put in place by Block One, Dan, other members of the community that I think will address all of the concerns that anyone may have now about funds at risk or unwanted attacks. But I mean, again, having something there for you in the future doesn't help those who already suffered from, right? And that's what I think is my real concern. And to bring Dan up so much because it almost seems like I'm attacking him. That's not my intention at all. But when recently, we all got the email, I imagine, from Block One, where they announced they would be using the 10% for votes. And also, there was sort of a list of criteria of the types of Ps that they would like to vote for. In that list, I would have expected that one of the BPs, one of the criteria is be a BP who's willing to contribute to a relief fund. Because that was the proposed solution that Dan himself wrote about in the Steemit post, was that he believed that BPs make enough to easily handle these types of situations and that we didn't need to worry about having this as part of the sort of layer one blockchain. And I think there are just a lot of missed opportunities, and I think we're just heavily focused on Constitution 2.0, and we're going to be leaving a lot of people behind in doing so. It's not going to be a majority.
Does that need to be in the Constitution, though? Is it something that is part of the general framework?
No, I don't think it needs to be in the Constitution.
Yeah, I guess I would argue, Britt, that I do see it as a concern, but I think that there's a component to that in the community. I don't know if I would agree that it needs to be explicitly listed in the Constitution. What?
That's right. I think it needs to be. I don't think it needs to be in the Constitution, but I think we as a community need to promote the idea more actively. It's kind of what I'm saying. It's like we need to make up for it not being in the Constitution. That's my
and some of that might come from just free market will by a block producer who may feel responsible because of what happened in some of those cases. In other cases, maybe it's a fund they set up, and with enough evidence, maybe they decide to do it. But I think we need to be careful about, it's a delicate balance where we saw even with ECAF that, there started to be these orders being given, and a lot of folks, I think there was some misalignment with the, not misalignment with the intent, but misalignment with how it was done. And I think when you
right.
order, that's a very strong word for someone who's not authorized to do that.
That's right. I agree with you. The language of ECAF, I feel, did not reflect the community's desire.
Well, the intent was there. I think it was a good intent.
Yeah, that's right. But I feel like there were these weird undertones of authority, of just oddly structured organization, and just a lot of, I felt like a lot of people who were bidding for power. And that rubbed me the wrong way. And I spoke out against some people, Thomas Cox, a few other people, Sam, who was the arbiter in that particular situation, and was just met with hostility for even suggesting that the term order should not be used. So little things like.
I think though that people came around. I mean, I saw because I'm fairly active in the chats, and there was, at least from what I saw, and I would kind of disagree with you. I think I've seen that folks have come around and realized that the term order was probably not appropriate, and it was probably more appropriate to give an opinion. But having said that, also the beauty of
an opinion. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the beauty of this whole thing is that everybody's human. So, is it going to be perfect the first time? No. And if it was, I don't know. I actually feel I like that there's a little bit of chaos to some of these things, because it shows that um, you know, the chain, and as a community, we're evolving. We're evolving towards
Yeah.
cool things. Every day I'm in the
Yeah.
chat room, with Dan. Every day I learn something new, and every day I think I thought I knew something. I walk away with even more knowledge because I didn't consider certain aspects, to how this whole thing works. And Dan probably doesn't. Dan, as long as he's been around, I mean, there's still things that even he's learning after developing so many of these technologies like BitShares and Steemit, and now EOS, right? So I think everybody is working towards the ultimate goal of building the best software possible to hopefully free humanity if it's done right and with enough competition.
Yeah.
So
No, I agree with everything you said. I'm very impressed with the amount of discussion that is present in this community. The amount of, even if outrage, I still consider that passion. And it's very nice to see so many people involved in this debate, or let's say conversation. I'd rather say conversation. Yeah. So there's a lot of just healthy discourse, and that's good for any type of citizenry that is discussing governance. So,
right.
yeah, I agree with you.
So with that said, why don't we go to this? Why don't we go back to this code as law?
Oh yeah.
Portion. They were talking about it where they're balancing this. They're doing this delicate balance. So they're talking about here that they recognize, though, that while code is law, in some cases, there will be events that do occur. Bugs and other issues that we may need to resolve. So I think what they're trying to put in place here, from reading it, at least the way I'm understanding it, is they want a framework to resolve those issues when they happen. Because even with Ethereum and Bitcoin, I mean, there has been a history of those things when they do occur, and people just want to. I think it's nice to know what the framework will be to deal with those when they do occur.
Yeah.
So that's what that first part's about, it seems. And then they're talking about the recording contracts and enforcing subjective terms, which is, I think, the most challenging part to this whole thing. So what is a recording contract? For those that are wondering, it's basically something that tells you what the code is supposed to do in a human readable form. I think it's the best way to describe it. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but that's the way that's the way I've kind of shared it with others, I guess, is the takeaway from a recording contract. What you're supposed to get out of it is something you can read, and you're supposed to understand what you're signing up for, basically, which is unlike Ethereum, because Ethereum, in most cases, you're reading a white paper, which isn't necessarily tied to the code. And the code itself doesn't have anything that tells you, like an average person, what's going to happen. You can, of course, trust that the code is done or written, with the right intent, but there's no tie to that from a human perspective. So they talk about that. Go ahead, sorry.
And I think this is now, I believe, required to be present in all smart contracts.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
yeah, it's really good. I read some examples of recording contracts that were provided by Block One, and just for very simple smart contracts like Hello World. And you're right. It's a human readable representation of the intent.
Right. So it talks about here, if a recording contract wants to enforce other terms beyond the code, then they must do so by defining the process in the code for the grievances, judges, bonds, decisions, and enforcement. So I guess what they're saying here is that, that DApp level development of this recording contract can have those. But the way I understand it, though, is this is at the application layer, not the protocol layer. So it would be up to the developers and teams to do that. and then up to the community to govern um, trust and enforcement of those systems, which actually makes a lot of sense because you're going to have different applications built on EOS, and one governance, one mechanism for enforcement and grievances may not work for other ones. So they may need to be tailored specifically to the apps that um, they build, right? I don't know if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yep. I mean, something that you can actually do, I heard Thomas Cox talk about this, was that if you're unhappy with ECAF or any of these arbitration forms, you can actually, in the recording contract, define how, which form or organization you're responsible for your dispute. So it's kind of an opt-in uh, mechanism. So I think that's really good, especially if you're wanting to have a little bit more freedom and control over how conflicts and disagreements are settled.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, it's giving the communities also the framework to create their own structures, which is probably a good thing. But then they also have a need for objective boundaries. So talks about here that the needs for guarantees to feel safe and secure in some way. Now, obviously, nothing is absolutely guaranteed, in my opinion, but I do talk about here about the need for the protocol level arbitration orders being ended, or they're suggesting ending all protocol level arbitration orders, other than to render non-binding opinions on the intent of the code. And I think what they also mean here is that these are at the platform or the protocol level, not the app level. But it talks about here the requirement being the 2/3 plus one decision to alter the broken contract.
Yeah. So this is interesting. The 2/3 plus one decision, is this supposed to be? I'm going back to the recent issue that we had with EOS Store, how there was an attempt to freeze the account. 20 of the block producers uh, somehow implemented the blacklist, but EOS Store failed to do so, and then some of those transactions went through. I'm wondering if that is supposed to be 2/3 plus one, but perhaps that is just not in the code yet.
Oh, well, I heard that the latest thing I heard about that was that it was going to be implemented in the code, like that piece of it was going to be added to a contract, so it would be easier to, I guess, route that change through. I know there was some issues with maybe the communication, but it still
Yeah,
suggested some um, lack of ownership on EOS Store's part. I mean, from my perspective, I mean that's debatable, but the way I look at things like that, if someone's getting paid to do a job on the blockchain, the least they can do is show up for a meeting and make sure they're accountable to their holders. So,
yeah.
I
It
mean, yes,
just,
there
yeah,
is.
it was just unclear to me because I had assumed, the 2/3 plus one was just already there and implemented. But I guess not. I guess that's a coming feature.
Right. I think it was all of them at that point had to do it for that decision.
21
All
out
of
of
them would have had to do
21.
it.
Oh,
That was my understanding, and I could be wrong there, but I think that's
maybe
what
that's right.
because it was probably so drastic too to freeze someone's account. Like
Yeah,
it's pretty big. So, um,
sure.
so it talks about here. They do raise the implication of this that this means that the elected VPs have the same powers demonstrated by other folks and other blockchains, such as Ethereum with the DAO hack. Um, but this is nice. This is an advantage in a sense because it is a formalized process in the hands of the token holders rather than informal with hands of hash power voters. So I guess that's where it's a little different. Um, so then it talks about lost and stolen keys. And I don't want to read the whole thing, but one interesting thing I picked up here is that they talked about the support for Apple Secure Enclave um, feature. So the Touch ID, Face ID, and then they're going to implement time delays. So they think that by doing this, which is basically the biometric data, this will prevent a lot of the um, thefts that we're seeing with keys and tokens being lost. What do you think about that?
I mean, I'm not an Apple user.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's great to um, use an existing platform's services if you can, but really hope that either Block One or someone else is able to sort of implement that across the board in all mobile. Uh, but yeah, anyway. But also I don't know. There's a bit of a concern for me actually, because a lot of this, when we talk about biometric and these smartphones in terms as being a way to secure your funds, this is actually only available to just wealthy people on this planet. And I would say most people on this planet actually just have no access to a device that has biometric uh, capability. And I see crypto, ETH especially, as something that should be available for everyone and kind of have security for everyone. So I think what you were talking about was having like the multi-sig bank account kind of contract uh, baked in. That I actually am more excited about that kind of stuff than the biometric Apple Enclave, all that.
Well, I don't know if you watched. I don't know if you saw that that latest EOS hackathon, but there was a team there that had made even like a. It was almost like a kiosk for, I guess, private keys and accessing wallets. But basically, they talked about it, it's almost like they hinted at like you could have like a open source but verifiable kiosk that you could deploy in a country, like a third world
Oh
country.
wow.
No, yeah, where there's no
Yeah.
technology, and you have someone go there at one time and load up all these biometric markers,
Yep.
identifiers, and then from there you can use that almost as like a bank. So I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
cool. That actually
That
addresses
is
I
good.
think what you're talking about.
Yep.
And
Wow. That is good.
yeah, you could have several of these providers. It's not just one. You could have several people do it because presumably the software would be open source, and you could have a way to even insure those facilities. So there's a lot of different free market
Yeah.
principles or methods at play here that I think will address those needs. I mean, they're really opportunities is the way you look at it.
Yep. Yeah, that's good to hear. That's
Yeah.
and
Yeah, that was in Hong Kong.
it's
If you're interested.
impressive at how it's already something you've seen.
Yeah, yeah, they had it at EOS
Yeah.
Hong Kong. It was one of the teams there. I actually thought they should have won. I don't think they got the top prize, but they were one of the top three. I know that. So anyway, it does talk about here that they also have some features for Android, and that'll have both the time delay as well as this elliptic curve um, for the added security, and I think that's in many of the other smart devices as well. So that, along with multi-sig features, there is some protection even for Android users, which I know makes up a good percentage of the world's population of phones, if you will.
Yep. Yep.
So, so it talks about arbitration orders for the stolen private keys. This still looks like this is the part I was going to show you because this is the part that kind of hints at that banking solution. So the first paragraph talks about that. I don't know if you see that, but it says
Yeah.
one way is to opt into a banking recording contract that controls the tokens on behalf of owners. So I see most average people probably using a system like that.
You see, so this is another sentence, I would say, or piece of information that hints on you being able to choose the arbiters behind your contract. If you look at that second paragraph, where it says, it's an opt-in smart contract where the ECAF slash producers are the arbitration system.
Correct. But it's an opt-in system versus
Yep.
a, you're going to do
Yep.
this, which is genius. And I'm actually surprised more people haven't talked about this. I mean, I just pulled it up today and at first it just
Yep.
looks like it's a constitution proposal, but when you read this, it's actually more features to it.
That's right. Especially when there's so much flack that EOS got around ECAF by people who were clearly EOS. It's just such a great counter argument to say, actually, you can include in your Ricardian contract that ECAF is not going to be the arbiter or the dispute handler, and you don't have to worry about that. You are totally able to do that.
Correct. So it talks about it just talks about that, like you're saying, you have an option for that. And then the last part is the gravy of it all, which is the Constitution itself, which was what I'd like to just get to and talk with the community about items 1 through 9. The first one being the dispute of the code itself, the intent of the code, I should say, and what is needed to address that. So they talk about here that I guess they're defining this. They say a super majority, which I'm guessing is that 2/3 plus one. They have the provisions to freeze a contract during an active dispute until the code is fixed or one becomes available. So I guess I'm thinking that this is applicable to the core code itself, not the. I'm not sure if this would apply to the DApp level issues. It says the producers may charge a reasonable fee and or place other reasonable requirements to the parties to the dispute.
Yeah, I think that is on the DApp level.
Okay.
But that's a good point. That should be made more clear.
Well, I guess one of the things I was curious about is, as you start to get more of these systems in place, I'm wondering how that's going to be managed. Even, how are you going to manage thousands of DApps?
Well, hopefully, yeah. I imagine these kinds of interventions are going to happen when you have something similar to what happened with the DAO and Ethereum. They're going to be, serious events that a lot of parties who had stake just cannot walk away from without it being somehow frozen, corrected, or.
But I guess I'm wondering.
To fix the contract.
Yeah, but I guess I'm wondering, like for an average like that you have out there locally done, if there's some kind of a.
Well, you can just update it yourself, actually. So if you have an app that you've deployed and for some reason it's not functioning correctly, you have the power just to update it.
Right, but I guess I'm wondering, like the dispute and when you do it, that could be a little squirrely. So that's why I think this still needs clarification. I'm presuming they actually mean it's the core code, not the actual DApps at the DApp level. But maybe I'm wrong with that.
Yeah, I think it is the DApp level, just based on some sitting in with Dan in the governance channel. I asked some specific questions and he responded to me, and this seems to be what he's talking about. I mean, I gave some examples of, let's say I have a smart contract, and I easily share that or easily show that it's not behaving in accordance to the Ricardian contract that was attached to it. At that point, can I start that arbitration process to get it frozen so that my users aren't affected? And it's like, yeah. So
Right.
yeah, but I mean, to think that this would be happening, I mean, maybe, but to think that this would happen for thousands of apps, frequently, I think that would be a good problem to have if we have
It is a good
so
problem.
many,
I'm
so
wondering.
many.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering though if someone could like if a competitor of EOS could use it as an attack. They just start
Um,
setting up a bunch of dumb
that's
apps.
interesting.
And they
Yeah,
clog up the decision
the
making
process. Yeah.
by the BPs. That was one attack vector we were talking about like yesterday, and the other one was RAM attacks. So like,
Yeah. What is that?
well, like you could have the guys from any other blockchain or even inside that want to be cute um, with very little money. I mean, it is a couple million. They still need millions of dollars, but they could just buy up all the RAM and increase the barrier for apps to be
Oh,
launched on the main chain. So we
yeah.
started talking about how BPs could get together, organize, and create alternative chains so that you still allow developers to publish their applications, because if RAM prices start to get out of control and people can't bring their products to market and they don't have RAM, people are going to look for other you know platforms to launch their dApps on. Now maybe the
Yeah.
free market, and the hope is
We're
that the free
already
market
kind of
comes in.
seeing
And,
that.
what's that?
We're already seeing that actually. The last 2 days. I mean, RAM right now is at zero point 0.1 EOS a kilobyte, I think, and that's because it was found. I forget which BP was doing it, but they are
EOS
openly
Nation.
speculating. Is that what it? Yeah,
Well, one of them was EOS Nation. I know they announced.
yeah, EOS Nation, and just I don't know, quite blatant about it. Uh, but
Well,
I think then they've freed it.
that brings up another point though, because I mean that was another thing I talked about with Dan, is that the BPs, they have control over the supply of RAM. Now they're also able to buy and sell RAM. So in a sense, they can do insider trading, and they have
Yeah,
insider information on when they're going to pull the trigger or when they're going to make an announcement on a RAM upgrade. So I mean, they
yeah,
can make a lot of money just by knowing that information.
that's right. Yeah, I've seen some proposals that it needs to be announced several days ahead of time. Something that's really interesting though, if you look at the specs that many of the block producers have on their websites, I mean, you see 4 terabytes of RAM, 64, whatever,
Yeah.
and then you look at the total RAM pool, and it's like, have they not been sticking those pieces of RAM in their machines? Like,
What do you mean?
or
Like,
are they? Well, it just seems like when you try to do like account for how much RAM should actually be available based on public information of the hardware that BPs have, you see that there's an insufficiency. Like either BPs are lying about how much RAM their systems have,
no.
or they're just kind of sitting on this supply and they're just going to add it over time and just
Well,
kind of gradually start
well,
sticking
no.
them in the
Well, I think
servers.
there's a couple challenges though to something like this, because one, um, you have your prime BPs and you have your backups, and so one of the issues is, can prime BPs upgrade to 1 TB? They probably can, or they can even go more, 256 gigabytes. They can increase dramatically. The challenge is, how do you keep the level of um, RAM to a degree that you can still encourage people to come in and provide backup services to the chain. And so if you start to go up way too fast, too high, quickly, without actually any apps being built, um, it sort of puts a damper on the sustainability of those backups to provide
Wait,
their services.
so were you talking about people coming in and providing RAM to which
No,
people are not BPs?
no, I'm talking about standby BPs and even unofficial backup BPs who don't have, like, let's say, so I don't know if you know how all this works, but even like the revenue for BPs, you have a 1/4% that goes to your top guys, just by default, right? If you're in the top ranking, you get the quarter
Those are
percent.
the 21.
Yes. Now you also have 0.75% reward that's allocated based on the number of votes you have. And so that's the other part of that 1% that makes up your pay as a
Oh,
BP.
no, that's interesting.
Yeah. So now if you have smaller guys, keep in mind though, the rule to get the reward for votes, you must be able to claim at least 100 EOS. So that would mean, you need a good portion of votes to get that. If you don't make the cutoff, even if you get votes, you don't get paid. So the challenge is, if the cutoff is 100 EOS, but your machine is required to run more RAM and scale up, and you have a couple guys around, is that a sustainable operation for you? So
Yeah.
so the RAM needs to really scale with. You almost need to see also the price scale up, because if you don't, will be hard for those smaller guys to maintain their systems.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's
most of the RAM isn't even being used now. It's all speculators. That's the other problem with this whole thing. So
okay. So see, I haven't seen stats on that, but that's disappointing. That's true. Yeah.
yeah, I mean they're not using it. They're just squatting on it. So what we're trying to organize now is, what if you set up side chains that counterbalance that issue? You have backup BPs, provide other services to developers. So maybe what we end up having is an EOS main and like a Litecoin version of EOS, where there would be experimentations and different governance structures, and it would give people a different route to launch their solutions to market, right? So it's very similar to Bitcoin. With Bitcoin. Are you there?
I'm not entirely familiar with side chains and whether that tech is even in place right now. But I mean, I've read, supposedly EOS can support it, and not only side chains, there's some degree of sort of interoperability between blockchains. So I don't know. I'm ready. If you know specifically, I'm all ears. But I am ready to see some more cases of this being used, and trying to understand exactly how it works. Another thing I'm a little fuzzy on. You seem to have enough specifics to maybe address this question. Is the inflation, which is supposedly 5%.
Right.
Now, when we say inflation and when we talk about that 5%, is that all going to BPs?
No,
or is this something completely different?
Yeah, so you have 1% for BPs. You have, and the 1% is made up of two components. Now you have the quarter percent, and you have the 0.75%. And 0.75 is based on the votes, the quarter is based on the prime. And in addition to that, you have 4%, which is given to worker proposals, which is what no one actually is talking about outside the small Telegram rooms that we're probably in. But I mean, most of the general community isn't as aware of this stuff. But actually, if you think about it, the worker proposals are a bigger pot than the block producer rewards. Right now, there's a number of proposals, and that's really, in my opinion, the rocket fuel for EOS. It's like you're putting the gasoline in the rocket so it can just blast off. Because what's going to happen is it's going to allow a lot of people within the community to develop the tools, the public good tools that are needed to just launch this thing. Because right now you don't have that. Everybody's just working on just.
So when do we start voting? When do we have to wait a year, like, before we get that 5% allocation? What's the holdup?
Well, I mean, right now it's actually not bad, because from the perspective of a worker proposal fund, all those funds are just building. Each day, each month. I mean, it's just building over time. So there's going to be this bucket there. So I think that's pretty cool. And if you think about the economics of EOS, right now it's being hated on. A lot of people don't even know about it. So that proposal fund, it's accumulating all this EOS tokens, but the price is going to go up. And as the price goes up, now that they're accumulating all these tokens, the fund even is going to be larger. So you can employ even more people who are aware of, the general economics of the system, and empower communities and developers and teams to really demonstrate the power of a cooperative community that's all working together and accountable. So it's not just going to be Wild West style and, I think people getting money, but it's going to be a way that people can look at a proposal, offer their solutions or services, and get rewarded for it, help the community, and it's just going to create this crazy system of not crazy in a bad way, but crazy in a good way, that you have a talented group of community members who are going to be able to even provide more services. I mean, there's a guy like NS James who created Scatter as a wallet, and he didn't really get paid for what he did, right? Imagine if NS James had the ability to be funded by the worker proposal system, and he could add more Scatter.
Any project or upgrade he proposes in the future, all but guaranteed to get voted. I mean, just because of how much he's contributed so far. I mean, I use Scatter, so I mean, he has my vote.
Yeah, and is it perfect? No, but I mean, he built it and he put it out there, So I guess imagine when you have like thousands of these guys and gals, in a position to be successful and able to feed their families. I think you're going to see some amazing things. So I think a lot of people aren't talking about that. It's just kind of no one's saying anything, but I think it's pretty neat that you have tools like that in EOS. So that's a big one. The other one that no one talks about is the fact that RAM, there's all these memes now. I don't know if you were in the Telegram chat yesterday, but I'm in there. I'm known as Urius, but there's like these memes now about RAM. So, everybody says like when Lambo usually, or when Moon. Well, now the new one is going to be when Rambo. So like there's this Rambo meme going on because of Ram's price. But what they talked about doing is, and something that a lot of people who don't follow this as closely know, is that anytime you sell RAM, you're charged 1% of your fee. So you can think of it like this. What's really interesting is, while EOS is perceived to be very inflationary, there's all these mechanisms in place that counterbalance that. So as more people speculate on RAM, more fees are collected. The more volatility you have in RAM, the more those tokens go away. But then you have the counterbalance of the worker proposal. So you can actually end up with a situation where you have a deflationary currency. How amazing is that? That's what no one's talking about. That is interesting to me.
So where does the 1% for RAM purchasing and selling go? Is that part of the worker proposals?
No, I'm saying if the 1% is extinguished, right? If the 1% is extinguished, but it's
so that's what it is. It's burnt.
I'm thinking. I'm pretty sure that's what I read, and I can find the exact literature.
Okay.
But if you have that type of a system, you have a mechanism in place where potentially, because of the volatility in the markets, you have a deflationary system, while on paper people are looking at this as inflationary. So no one's actually talking about this, which is very bizarre world of
I think Block One, I don't know if they released anything, but I think they have a data on this, because that's, Dawn 4 was when we saw the market, the RAM introduced as this separate entity, and apparently that was because of they observed in 3.0. So I think they probably have a very clear understanding of why these things are in place, and what exactly they're safeguarding against, and what benefits they bring to the ecosystem. I haven't seen anything, but I assume.
Yeah, Larimer hinted at it yesterday, because I was on the fence originally. Like, I was not convinced this was the way it was going. It was gonna work out okay with the RAM prices. But the more I thought about it, I said, well, there's two interesting aspects to it. One is, as RAM goes up, more solutions are going to come out, because it's just free market, true free market that we have. So someone's going to build sidechain solutions. We're going to get backups to build their solutions, and they're going to be able to sell them, to developers or teams like myself, teams like I'm trying to build here in Phoenix. So that's a good thing. And then in addition to that, this fee structure is going to put deflationary pressures on the currency itself. So I think that is just phenomenal, and it's not something anybody is talking about that I know of. But it's pretty cool. I think they're doing a good job so far. I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah.
Even though it's chaotic, it's a good chaotic. It's like the one thing in crypto that is worth actually learning about at this point.
Yeah. No, it's far from boring. That's a good thing.
Yeah. So let's see where we were with this. We're almost there. So we're on. That was number one. Number two is in the Constitution, block producers shall not freeze or modify contracts that are operating as intended. So I guess I'm wondering though, what does operating as intended mean? I guess that's the Ricardian contract.
Yeah, that's the Ricardian thing. Yeah, we have to use the human wetware, unfortunately, in that case, and hopefully there won't be any controversial, like, things that suffer from the subjective nature of English or whatever language it's written in.
Right. It says 3 is contract developers are not liable for damages caused by unintentional bugs in the code. All parties are responsible for auditing the code and the Ricardian contract before use. That's an interesting one.
It's a little protection clause in there.
Well, I'm wondering though, like, so if that's the case, then, so if they're not liable for bugs in the code, how are they accountable then?
And that's the developer. What about a party that interacts with the contract?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what they're trying to do there, but that one's a little squirrely. 4 is all service providers who produce tools to facilitate the construction and signing of transactions on behalf of others shall present the full Ricardian contract terms of this Constitution and other referenced contracts. That makes sense. It's just if you're using the software, present this Constitution along with your own. The one issue I do have with that though is does this conflict with a code as law deployment of an app? So if someone wanted to do a code as law, do they have to share this? Because this would kind of suggest then the code is not law for those people. But I mean, that's not a huge deal breaker. It's just a question I have. And then it says here, 5 is no party shall have a fiduciary responsibility to support the value of the EOS token. This one was standard. This one was in the previous one.
Yeah.
6 is, and then 6 is a Ricardian contract is deemed accepted when a transaction based on that contract is incorporated into the blockchain. So that makes sense. Just if you're going to make a contract, I guess they're coupled together, right? The Ricardian contract. Oh, this is saying it's activated when you submit it into the chain. Okay. 7 is parties voluntarily consent for all other parties to permanently and irrevocably retain, copy, analyze, and distribute all broadcast transactions. So this goes back to Dan's, I guess, description of how chains work, right? It's like a radio, and you're playing your content on a radio, and people can record it and basically do what they want with it. So that's just inherent in blockchain technologies, but I guess they explicitly stated it there. And then 8 is use of the blockchain shall constitute consent to its terms.
Just using it, you've essentially accepted the Constitution.
Right. And then 9 is the... Go ahead, sorry.
No, that's it.
And then 9 is the Constitution may be amended by a vote of the EOS token holders that attracts no less than 15% staked vote participation among tokens and no fewer than 10% more yes votes than no votes, sustained for 30 continuous days within a 120-day period. This one I had a little bit of...
I like this one.
I don't like it. Tell you why. This one I had some issues with because it says 15% staked vote participation among tokens. Well, the problem with that is, or at least in my book, is like EOS, they have 10% of the vote. So,
Yeah.
I don't know how
Yeah,
that's
but I mean,
work.
what's interesting. What I like about this is that you can vote yes or no, so it's yay or nay.
Mhm.
If it was all you need the scheme for it to pass, well then yeah, I would take disagreement. But I mean, all you would need is 10% of the community to vote no or in opposition to block one, and you would essentially cancel them out.
That's a good point.
Because I mean, what this is calling for is for not just to have a 2/3 plus one or some type of majority number. It's actually that there needs to be at least 15 votes, and there needs to be a difference between the yes and no's, such that it's, what, 10%? What is the difference gap?
Right. It is a
Let me
10%.
read. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that could, so in order for a yes to go through or a no, it needs to have at least 10% more than the opposition, and then that needs to float above 15% total. It's very complicated, and I wonder if that complexity forces or perhaps puts us at risk of not seeing its pitfall. But I like the idea of yes and no.
Hmm.
So being able to express opposition, that makes me feel a little better.
Interesting. Going back to your question here, I don't know if you saw on regarding the lost keys or compromise keys. Um,
Yeah.
there was some proposals. I don't know if you saw to block producers for these individuals from the community. There has been some of those. I was going to pull that up, but they do have.
Yeah, I haven't seen that actually. I know of so EOS Tribe, which they're not a block producer, but I think they're candidate. They're maybe ranked like 26 or so.
Mhm.
Um, they've created I forgot what it was called, like a Genesis Relief Fund or I don't know. It had a very nice name. And they created a Telegram channel. I think there's like 20 people in it.
Mhm.
So it's not like getting too much traction, but that's the only one I'm aware of. I imagine lots of people are trying to do it independently in their own channels, and it just has not been consolidated to amass enough for that tipping point event.
Right.
Because it's so political. If every block producer kind of leads their own charge, well, then they stand to gain by being the owners of that success story or whatever. So it's preventing us from really coming together and uniting under one banner.
Yeah, it's a definitely a process in play right now. But I think one of the things that is nice to see is that at least people are willing to help. It's not just you're on your own and good luck, because that's what you would have gotten in another chain.
I
Yeah,
saw very few people with the good luck attitude,
yeah,
and I saw
exactly.
a lot of people concerned, and and even if they didn't want to stand in protest, they at least expressed sympathy and empathy. So it felt good. I feel like we have a good community behind here.
The other thing to consider is, and I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but I could tell you if like we had a block producer here in Phoenix, I'm pretty sure if we were a prime guy, if we were prime guys, and we had enough valid evidence for those folks that lost their tokens, that they actually lost them, and there was no way they can get them back. If we had the ability to, um, we would probably make most of those folks whole just through free market principles of us giving them tokens. I'm not saying that's what's going
Wait,
to
are
happen, but I have.
you
What?
BP candidate?
Well, I'm saying that, yeah. Oh no, we're not. I'm not a BP candidate. I was doing, I did have a test net up at one time, and I was organizing a lot of stuff. But now what we're doing is more locally, just helping people build their DApps. So just raising awareness, and we have a little meetup group here that we run, and we're trying to throw events and hopefully
When's
make.
the next meetup?
We usually it's every Saturday. I mean, today we had like a virtual hangouts, but actually that's
Okay.
why I did this one again, because the virtual hangout I did was on OBS, and OBS with Google Hangouts doesn't work well. It like slows down the video. So I did this
Hmm.
one to just get something out that was the content was going to be smoother, and also just to practice, because in like 2 weeks I'm going to do it again at the same time, which is usually 9 o'clock Arizona time. And then usually once a month we have in-person meetings where we do like we go over code, we go over different ideas. I have a couple I can even show now, like white papers we have on projects, community ideas. I mean, they may not make a lot of money, but a lot of this, I don't do for money anyway. I just do it. So I think that eventually, with the
Mm.
expertise, you can you can make a market for yourself with the knowledge that's gained. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to teach people how to fish. We don't want to just give them fish.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Let's. I'll stay in contact. I mean, I'm in Tempe actually,
Oh, what
so
the
I'm in the Phoenix. Yeah,
heck?
I'm in the Phoenix area. So.
Well, we got a channel here. What the coincidence, huh? This is interesting. We have a whole community here. So we have on Meetup group. If you go, there's a EOS.io, Project EOS.io. We're probably the only group in Phoenix or Arizona that has a
Yeah.
team. But we have some members, and we meet usually bi-weekly. Or we go to like the Coffee Cartel. We also have
Yeah, that's me.
yeah,
Totally.
we have incubators too that we go to. So we have facilities we can go to. 2 days ago, I think 2 or 3 days ago, we met up, a small group of us, and actually attended the EOS IO, the online training. I don't know if you attended that, but it was like a developers. Um, they actually threw an event. OCI did. So one of our
Okay.
members was nice enough to organize that, and so we have some really good members. I mean, we are a small core group, but I think we're going to build it out, and we also have Arizona Decentralized, so we're part of that whole community of crypto folks. So I think Arizona is
Yeah,
actually
that's
one of
great.
the places that people aren't aware of that's coming up. I mean, we can definitely compete
Yeah.
with New York and LA and San Francisco. It's just we just got to get organized. So that's what I'm doing here.
Well, with New York's bit license, I think anyone can compete with them.
Well, did you,
Arizona, it's been really exciting to see a lot of the legislation that's been passed, and I don't. Yeah, and also, I mean, at ASU, there's a blockchain kind of curriculum that's being put together as well. I mean, already in existence, actually. Just
yeah, I mean
the
ASU. We
ideas
have
are being finalized.
ASU, and we have Mesa Community College is starting their blockchain program. So it's one of the first community colleges around the country that has an actual program that people can go to and get some education, and allow them to get exposure to these opportunities. So I think you're going to see more of those. I think this is just the beginning. The interesting part that we're trying to work on, and just this is even just a shout out to everybody watching this, is we're trying to build tribes, almost like tribal. Um, it sounds maybe bizarre to people who don't know about crypto, but we're trying to actually build like more like localized communities where people can come together and use the currency versus just speculating on it, which is different than a lot of projects. So we're trying to
Yeah.
develop like a trust system within our communities, and also develop guilds for people who want to learn a certain skill within crypto. And so it could be marketing, it could be coding, it could even be just taking a physical asset like that exists today and digitizing it, and helping people to earn money for things they may already have or possess or have superpowers in. So um, that's the project that I'm working on right now. And again, it's not something I think would make a lot of money, but it's a tool that's needed. I mean, you need to have the ability for me to connect with you, for example, because you're a crypto guy, and there's not a lot of people in Arizona who even know this stuff. So that's a very valuable connection to make. I think just knowing people who understand the technology or who can teach others about it. So
Yeah, sounds interesting. Yeah, I'll join. I'll expect to hear more about it.
so what else is on your mind? Is there anything locally that you're aware of for EOS? Or because I moved here literally 6 months ago. I have no clue, probably half of what Phoenix is about, but I'm learning, and I'm trying to make myself
Yeah,
useful here. But
yeah. I mean, it's a similar. I've been here for over a year now, but not too much longer. 6 months ago. Okay, so you're feeling this desert heat now and starting to freak out, right? This is the
actually,
first time you're seeing
actually, actually,
115-degree
I've
days.
done I've done okay. I mean, what I do is I get up early usually, and I go and go for a run, or I go
Nice.
late. I go to like
Today it
Camelback.
was phenomenal. I don't know if you got out there early today.
No,
Oh man,
get
it
out.
was it was nice.
Yeah, but if you get up
Yeah.
early enough, you can enjoy. And then usually at night, like towards sundown, I go to Camelback, and I'll go and do the
Yep.
mountain on the backside, and I'll just use the shade. And it's hot, but I mean I'm okay. It's dry, so it doesn't really do.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
If you can
So
get in the shade, it's fine. It's really the sun that just hurts you. It's like the sunbeams hurt.
yeah,
So if you can block yourself from them, you're not going to be hit by that laser pistol. Um, but yeah, I'm here. I'm a developer, so at the moment I've really just been playing around with the tech, just making contracts, uh, making accounts, moving RAM around, finding myself in unfortunate situations of having to wait 72 hours to get my steak unfrozen, and like, so it's yeah, I'm just toying around. Uh, don't have anything too concrete at the moment, but I'll be looking to make something.
cool. Well, there's like I said,
Yeah.
there's a team here. There's a small team, probably a dozen, maybe two when news comes out, then you get those folks. But I mean, a dozen good folks that are around that are playing with this stuff, and the intent would be at some point here to have more of like a incubator, where people can come in and pitch their ideas to the globe, not just in Arizona, but the globe. So to establish this channel as EOS Phoenix, and the globe comes here to get inspiration and ideas, because one thing I've noticed is that I don't see a lot of people doing these things. Like I don't see a lot of um, grassroots locations where like there's a hub for innovation. I mean, I see a lot of BPs campaigning, which is awesome, but what I don't see yet is the empowerment of helping other people. And so that's where EOS Phoenix is trying to distinguish itself, because we want to be more of a community locally that helps each other with things versus I'm not to say that the BPs are doing this, but like I don't get there's no direct payment for us doing these things. We do them because we know it's needed. It's a public good that you need to have in a community so
Yeah.
that people can use the software and the currency. Otherwise, if you're just the only one who has something, it's really not worth anything. So what I'm about is the network effects on the currency.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah. I honestly just want to meet some real people. I mean, I'm all for sitting in a dark room behind a computer screen, but I get cabin fever, and I need to have a warm body next to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, awesome. Well, find us on Meetup, and if you have time, the next one we have here, please join us. I'm gonna try to get better at these. This is my first attempt at Google Hangouts. Usually, I use OBS, and I have made videos. I've tried to make videos like I think once every 2 weeks now since March, or maybe even before that. Just trying to share education and things that I learn, and it's through interacting with guys like you that I'm also able to improve, my knowledge on things, and also consider different perspectives. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge and expertise on these things as I'm coming along the journey with you.
I mean, hey, not at all. You filled me in on a lot of things that I was really lacking, and it's good to have a conversation available for more of these types of hangouts.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and I guess until next time, or until I meet you at our actual meetup, enjoy your Saturday. Stay cool out there as well. Don't
Okay.
overheat like I'm
Yeah,
doing.
you too.
I'm going to Camelback later. So, all right.
Okay, start drinking water and prepare for
Yes.
it.
Yes. Now,
Yeah.
peace.